Desmond Blackwell's journey to becoming a respected naval officer began far from the sea, in the landlocked town of Millbrook, Iowa. Born in 1984 to Gerald and Evelyn Blackwell, Desmond was the youngest of 3 children in a family steeped in military tradition. His father, a retired Army colonel, instilled in him a rigid sense of discipline and duty from an early age. Growing up, Desmond was a model student and athlete, excelling in both academics and sports. His piercing eyes and square jaw, inherited from his father, gave him a natural air of authority, even as a teenager. Despite the pressure to follow in his father's footsteps and join the Army, Desmond felt drawn to the sea. By the time Desmond received his posting as a commander at the Pelican Bay Naval Base in 2020, his relationship with Valerie was hanging by a thread. On the surface, they maintained the appearance of a perfect military couple, but behind closed doors, silence and tension reigned. As he approached his late 30s, Desmond Blackwell was a man at the peak of his professional powers, yet standing on the precipice of a personal crisis that would soon engulf him. Zoe Brennan's path to the naval base in Pelican Bay was far from conventional. Born in 1997 in the bustling heart of Seattle, Zoe was the only child of Liam Brennan, a successful software engineer, and Amelia Brennan, a free-spirited artist. From an early age, Zoe was caught between 2 worlds, her father's structured, logical approach to life, and her mother's bohemian, creative influence. Growing up, Zoe showed a remarkable ability to bridge these 2 seemingly opposing worldviews. She excelled in both mathematics and creative writing, often surprising her teachers with her versatility. Her childhood was filled with coding camps in the summer and art retreats in the winter, fostering a unique blend of analytical and creative thinking. Zoe's teenage years were marked by a growing sense of wanderlust and a desire to make a difference in the world. She volunteered at local shelters, participated in climate change rallies, and even spent a gap year teaching English in Thailand. Her experiences abroad opened her eyes to global issues and ignited a passion for international relations and diplomacy. When it came time for college, Zoe chose to attend the University of Washington, majoring in international studies with a minor in computer science. Her diverse interests and skills made her a standout student, and she quickly became known for her ability to bring people together and mediate conflicts within student organizations. It was during her junior year that Zoe first became interested in the role of the military in international affairs. A guest lecture by a naval officer on humanitarian missions sparked her curiosity, leading her to research more about the Navy's non-combat roles. The idea of combining her love for technology, her interest in global relations, and her desire to serve a greater cause began to take shape. Despite some initial skepticism from her artistically inclined mother, Zoe applied for an internship at the Pelican Bay Naval Base in her senior year. Her unique background and impressive skill set made her application stand out, and she was thrilled to be accepted into the program. As Zoe packed her bags for Pelican Bay in the summer of 2022, she was filled with a mix of excitement and nerves. At 25, she was older than many of her fellow interns, but she saw this as an advantage, bringing a level of maturity and worldly experience to her role. Little did Zoe know that her decision to step into the world of naval administration would lead her down a path that would dramatically alter the course of her life, and ultimately, bring it to a tragically premature end. The first encounter between Commander Desmond Blackwell and Zoe Brennan was unremarkable, a brief introduction during the orientation for new interns at the Pelican Bay Naval Base. Desmond, tasked with welcoming the fresh faces, found his gaze lingering a moment longer on Zoe. Her confident posture and intelligent eyes stood out among the nervous group of newcomers. For Zoe, the commanding presence of Desmond was intimidating, yet intriguing. She noted the respect he commanded from everyone in the room, the way his voice carried authority without being overbearing. It was a quality she admired and hoped to emulate in her own career. Over the next few weeks, their paths crossed frequently. Zoe's assignment to the base's technology upgrade project meant she often needed to consult with senior officers, including Desmond. Their initial interactions were purely professional, discussions about security protocols and software implementations. However, as the days turned into weeks, both began to look forward to these meetings. Desmond found Zoe's fresh perspective refreshing, her questions challenging him to think beyond established protocols. For Zoe, Desmond's years of experience and strategic thinking were fascinating, offering insights into a world she was eager to understand. The turning point came during a late-night strategy session. As the rest of the team trickled out, Desmond and Zoe remained, engrossed in a debate about the ethical implications of AI in military decision-making. The office grew quiet, the soft glow of computer screens illuminating their animated discussion. It was in this moment, as Zoe passionately argued her point, that Desmond felt a spark he hadn't experienced in years. Her intelligence, combined with her youthful energy, awakened something in him he thought long dormant. Zoe, too, felt a shift in the air, suddenly acutely aware of Desmond not just as a superior officer, but as a man. Their conversation drifted from professional to personal. Desmond spoke of his struggles to balance his career with his personal life, carefully omitting specific details about his troubled marriage. Zoe shared her dreams of making a difference, her fears of not living up to her potential. In those quiet hours, a connection formed, bridging the gap of age and rank. As they finally prepared to leave, their hands brushed while reaching for the same file. The touch, though brief, sent a jolt through both of them. They stood there, inches apart, the air heavy with unspoken tension. It was Desmond who broke the spell, stepping back and clearing his throat. "Good night, Miss Brennan," he said, his voice slightly hoarse. Zoe nodded, unable to trust her own voice, and hurried out. That night marked the beginning of a dangerous dance. In the days that followed, their interactions took on a new dimension. Lingering glances, subtle touches, and private jokes became their secret language. They sought out opportunities to work together, their professional collaboration a thin veil for their growing attraction. Both Desmond and Zoe knew they were treading on forbidden ground. The strict rules against fraternization within the Navy, the significant age gap, and Desmond's marital status all screamed caution. Yet, the pull between them grew stronger, a current threatening to sweep away their better judgment. As summer faded into autumn, Desmond and Zoe stood on the precipice of a decision that would alter the course of their lives forever. The line they were about to cross would set in motion a chain of events neither could have foreseen, leading them down a path of passion, paranoia, and ultimately, tragedy. The affair between Desmond Blackwell and Zoe Brennan began in earnest on a rainy October evening. A conference in Seattle provided the perfect cover for their first clandestine meeting, away from the watchful eyes of the naval base. In the anonymity of a boutique hotel, they finally gave in to the desire that had been building for months. What started as a physical attraction quickly deepened into something more complex. Desmond, trapped in a loveless marriage and burdened by the weight of his responsibilities, found in Zoe a breath of fresh air. Her optimism and zest for life reignited parts of himself he thought long extinguished. For Zoe, Desmond represented maturity, wisdom, and a depth of experience she found intoxicating. Their stolen moments became precious and frequent. Late-night strategy sessions turned into intimate dinners in out-of-the-way restaurants. Weekend work trips became passionate escapes. They developed a code, a secret language of subtle gestures and innocuous phrases that allowed them to communicate their feelings, even in crowded rooms. Zoe, despite her initial reservations about the affair, found herself falling deeply for Desmond. She saw beyond his uniform to the man underneath, complex, vulnerable, and in need of the very love and understanding she was eager to provide. In quiet moments, they shared their dreams and fears. Desmond spoke of his ambitions within the Navy, his desire to make a lasting impact. Zoe shared her hopes of using her skills to bridge the gap between military and humanitarian efforts. As weeks turned into months, their emotional connection deepened. They began to envision a future together, however impossible it seemed. Desmond started to consider the unthinkable, leaving his wife, potentially sacrificing his career for a chance at true happiness with Zoe. For her part, Zoe began to see her internship as more than just a stepping stone. It was now intrinsically linked to her relationship with Desmond. However, the reality of their situation cast a constant shadow over their happiness. The secrecy required to maintain their affair began to take its toll. Lies piled upon lies as they crafted elaborate stories to explain away their absences and coincidental meetings. The strain of living a double life weighed heavily on both of them. Zoe, in particular, struggled with the moral implications of their relationship. Her youthful idealism clashed with the reality of being the other woman. She found herself withdrawing from friends and family, unable to share the true nature of her turmoil. The guilt of potentially destroying Desmond's marriage and career gnawed at her conscience. Desmond, while exhilarated by his relationship with Zoe, became increasingly paranoid about discovery. Every glance from a colleague, every whispered conversation he wasn't part of, seemed to him a potential threat to their secret. His behavior at work became erratic, oscillating between periods of intense focus and distracted anxiety. As winter approached, their relationship reached a critical juncture. The passion and connection between them was undeniable, but so too were the cracks beginning to form under the pressure of their circumstances. Zoe, sensing the unsustainability of their situation, began to pull away, suggesting they take a step back to reassess their choices. Desmond, however, had become dependent on Zoe emotionally. The prospect of losing her triggered a desperation in him that would soon spiral out of control, setting the stage for the tragic events to come. As the affair between Desmond Blackwell and Zoe Brennan intensified, so did Desmond's paranoia. The initial thrill of their secret rendezvous gave way to a constant, gnawing fear of discovery. Every day became a tightrope walk for Desmond, balancing his duties as a respected naval officer with the emotional tumult of his illicit relationship. The first signs of Desmond's deteriorating mental state were subtle. He began to scrutinize his colleagues' behavior, reading hidden meanings into innocuous comments. A casual mention of Zoe's name in a meeting would send his heart racing, convinced that their secret had been exposed. He started arriving at work earlier and leaving later, partly to create more opportunities to see Zoe, but also to monitor the comings and goings of his staff. Desmond's relationship with his wife Valerie, which had already been strained, became even more distant. He withdrew from their few shared activities, citing work pressures as an excuse. When home, he was constantly on edge, checking his phone obsessively and reacting defensively to Valerie's attempts at conversation. His behavior didn't go unnoticed. Valerie sensed the change in her husband but attributed it to the stress of his position, unaware of the true cause of his agitation. As weeks passed, Desmond's paranoia began to manifest in more troubling ways. He started keeping meticulous records of his movements and interactions, creating alibis for times he spent with Zoe. He became overly interested in the base's security camera system, often reviewing footage under the guise of improving security protocols, but really searching for any evidence that might implicate him and Zoe. Zoe, initially flattered by Desmond's intensity, began to feel suffocated by his increasing demands for her time and attention. He would text her constantly, expecting immediate responses and growing agitated when she was slow to reply. He began to question her about her interactions with other colleagues, particularly younger male officers, his jealousy thinly veiled his concern for maintaining their secret. One incident particularly highlighted Desmond's deteriorating state. During a base-wide meeting, a junior officer made a joking reference to office romances. While others laughed, Desmond erupted in a disproportionate display of anger, harshly reprimanding the officer and abruptly ending the meeting. His outburst shocked everyone present, including Zoe, who watched with growing alarm as the man she thought she knew transformed before her eyes. Desmond's erratic behavior did not go unnoticed by his superiors. Whispers began to circulate about his fitness for command. Ironically, these murmurs only served to fuel Desmond's paranoia further, convincing him that his secret was on the verge of exposure. As the pressure mounted, Desmond's controlling behavior towards Zoe intensified. He began to dictate who she could talk to and where she could go, all under the guise of protecting their relationship. He hacked into her email and social media accounts, obsessively monitoring her communications. When Zoe confronted him about this invasion of privacy, Desmond's reaction was a mixture of remorse and rationalization, promising to do better, while simultaneously justifying his actions as necessary for their safety. Zoe found herself caught in an emotional whirlwind. The charming, confident man she had fallen for was increasingly being replaced by someone she hardly recognized. She began to distance herself, making excuses to avoid private meetings and limiting their communication to necessary work interactions. This withdrawal only served to heighten Desmond's paranoia and desperation. He interpreted Zoe's attempts to create space as evidence of her waning affection, or worse, her intention to expose their affair. His mind raced with scenarios of career ruin and public humiliation, driving him further into a spiral of anxiety and irrational behavior. As winter settled over Pelican Bay, the once passionate affair had devolved into a tense, fear-driven dynamic. Desmond's grip on reality continued to slip, setting the stage for a confrontation that would have fatal consequences. The man who had once commanded respect and admiration was now a shadow of his former self, driven by fear and desperate to maintain control over a situation that was rapidly spiraling beyond his grasp. The events of February 15, 2023, would forever change the lives of Desmond Blackwell and Zoe Brennan. The day began like any other at the Pelican Bay naval base, but an undercurrent of tension permeated the air between the two lovers-turned-adversaries. Zoe had been successfully avoiding private interactions with Desmond for weeks, but on this day, she couldn't escape a mandatory one-on-one progress report meeting. As she entered Desmond's office, the atmosphere was thick with unspoken words and suppressed emotions. Desmond, his face haggard from sleepless nights and constant worry, began the meeting with forced professionalism. He asked about project updates and deadlines, his voice strained as he struggled to maintain composure. Zoe responded with clipped, efficient answers, eager to conclude the meeting and escape the suffocating tension. As the meeting neared its end, Desmond abruptly changed the subject. His voice low and intense, he asked Zoe why she had been avoiding him. The professional veneer cracked, revealing the desperate, paranoid man beneath. Zoe, caught off guard by the sudden shift, attempted to deflect, citing work pressures and personal commitments. Desmond's composure shattered. He accused Zoe of planning to expose their affair, his voice rising with each word. Zoe, realizing the volatility of the situation, tried to calm him down, speaking in hushed tones and reminding him they could be overheard. But Desmond was beyond reason. He grabbed Zoe's arm, demanding to know if she had told anyone about their relationship. Zoe, frightened by his intensity, pulled away and headed for the door. Desmond, panicked at the thought of her leaving, moved to block her path. What happened next occurred in a matter of seconds, but would have repercussions lasting a lifetime. As Zoe attempted to sidestep Desmond, he reached out to stop her. In his agitated state, he misjudged his strength, pushing her harder than he intended. Zoe, caught off balance, stumbled backward. Time seemed to slow as Zoe fell. Her head struck the corner of Desmond's heavy oak desk with a sickening thud. She crumpled to the floor, motionless. Desmond stood frozen, the reality of what had just happened slow to penetrate the fog of his paranoia. When it did, panic set in. He rushed to Zoe, calling her name, shaking her gently. But Zoe didn't respond. A thin line of blood trickled from the point where her head had struck the desk. With trembling hands, Desmond felt for a pulse. Nothing. He tried CPR, his naval training kicking in automatically, but it was futile. In a moment of blind rage and fear, he had done the unthinkable. Zoe Brennan, the woman he had professed to love, lay dead at his feet. As the reality of the situation sank in, Desmond's mind raced. His career, his freedom, his entire life hung in the balance. In that moment, staring at Zoe's lifeless body, Commander Desmond Blackwell made a decision that would seal his fate. Instead of reporting the accident, he would attempt to cover it up. It was a choice born of desperation and fear, one that would lead him down a path of no return. In the immediate aftermath of Zoe's death, Desmond Blackwell's military training kicked in, but not in the way it should have. Instead of reporting the incident, his instincts turned to self-preservation. With a clinical detachment that would later horrify him, Desmond began to formulate a plan to conceal his role in Zoe's death. First, he needed to remove Zoe's body from his office. Waiting until after hours, Desmond used his security clearance to access rarely used corridors, carrying Zoe's lifeless form wrapped in a tarp to his car. He drove to a remote area of the base, a decommissioned bunker that was scheduled for demolition. There, in the cold, damp darkness, he concealed Zoe's body, knowing it might be weeks before the area was disturbed. Returning to his office, Desmond meticulously cleaned any traces of the incident. He disposed of the bloodied carpet, replacing it with a spare section he found in storage. He rearranged his furniture to hide any marks on the floor. Every surface was wiped down, every potential piece of evidence scrutinized and eliminated. Next, Desmond turned his attention to creating an alibi. He carefully edited security footage, using his knowledge of the system's vulnerabilities to erase any evidence of Zoe entering his office that fateful day. He then fabricated a paper trail, creating false meeting notes and emails to suggest Zoe had left the base early, citing a family emergency. To support this narrative, Desmond used Zoe's phone, which he had taken from her body, to send messages to her family and friends. He crafted a story about Zoe taking an impromptu trip, using her past spontaneous adventures as a template to make the lie more believable. He then disposed of the phone in the ocean during a late-night boat ride, ensuring it could never be traced. In the days that followed, Desmond played the role of a concerned superior officer. He inquired about Zoe's absence, feigning surprise and worry when she didn't return to work. He even volunteered to lead the initial internal inquiry into her disappearance, using his position to steer suspicion away from himself. As the investigation gained momentum, Desmond's behavior became increasingly erratic. He oscillated between periods of eerie calm and barely contained panic. He began drinking heavily, using alcohol to dull his conscience and steady his nerves. His relationships with colleagues deteriorated as he became defensive and quick to anger, attributes starkly at odds with his previous reputation. Despite his efforts, cracks began to appear in Desmond's carefully constructed facade. Security guards reported unusual activity on the night of Zoe's disappearance, though they couldn't identify the figure they had seen. A junior officer remembered hearing raised voices from Desmond's office on the day in question, directly contradicting Desmond's claim that Zoe had left early. As weeks passed, Desmond's guilt and fear began to consume him. He lost weight, his uniform hanging loosely on his frame. Dark circles under his eyes betrayed his sleepless nights. Every knock on his door, every glance from a colleague, sent his heart racing, convinced that his terrible secret had been discovered. Unbeknownst to Desmond, his increasingly suspicious behavior was drawing attention. As the net began to close around him, the once respected commander found himself trapped in a web of his own making, desperately trying to maintain a crumbling lie that threatened to destroy everything he had ever worked for. 2 weeks after Zoe Brennan's disappearance, the internal inquiry at the Pelican Bay naval base evolved into a full-fledged criminal investigation. The transition came after Zoe's parents, frantic with worry, filed a missing persons report with the local police. The incongruity between the cheerful messages they had received from Zoe's phone and her prolonged absence raised red flags for both the family and law enforcement. Detective Amelia Cordova, a seasoned investigator with the Pelican Bay Police Department, was assigned to the case. Known for her sharp intellect and dogged persistence, Cordova quickly recognized the complexity of investigating a disappearance on a naval base. She requested and received cooperation from the Naval Criminal Investigative Service, NCIS, forming a joint task force to unravel the mystery of Zoe's vanishing. The investigation began with a thorough examination of Zoe's background, movements, and relationships. Interviews with her colleagues painted a picture of a bright, ambitious young woman with a promising future. However, as Cordova dug deeper, she began to sense undercurrents of tension and secrets beneath the surface of the base's professional atmosphere. One name that kept surfacing in the interviews was that of Commander Desmond Blackwell. Initially, his role seemed that of a concerned superior, actively assisting in the search for Zoe. However, Cordova's instincts, honed by years on the force, told her there was more to Blackwell's story than met the eye. As the investigation progressed, inconsistencies in Blackwell's account began to emerge. His recollection of his last meeting with Zoe didn't align with other witness statements. Furthermore, his alibi for the night of Zoe's disappearance was vague and uncorroborated. Cordova's suspicions were further aroused by Blackwell's deteriorating demeanor. The once composed officer appeared increasingly agitated during questioning, his answers becoming defensive and contradictory. It was clear to the seasoned detective that Blackwell was hiding something, but the extent of his involvement remained unclear. The breakthrough in the case came from an unexpected source. A routine sweep of the base's decommissioned areas, prompted by Cordova's thorough approach, led to a grim discovery in an old bunker. The finding of Zoe's body sent shockwaves through the naval community and transformed the missing person case into a homicide investigation. As evidence began to mount, all eyes turned to Commander Desmond Blackwell. The net was closing in, and the truth of what happened on that fateful February day was about to come to light, forever changing the lives of all involved and shaking the Pelican Bay naval base to its core. The discovery of Zoe Brennan's body in the abandoned bunker marked a turning point in the investigation. Detective Cordova, now armed with physical evidence, intensified her focus on Commander Desmond Blackwell. The once respected officer found himself at the center of a rapidly unraveling web of lies and deception. Forensic analysis of Zoe's body revealed crucial details about her death. The head injury was consistent with a fall against a hard, angular surface, aligning with the corner of a desk or table. Time of death was estimated to be February 15th, the very day Zoe had last been seen on the base. This timeline directly contradicted Blackwell's earlier statements about Zoe leaving early that day for a family emergency. As Cordova delved deeper, more evidence came to light. Despite Blackwell's attempts to erase security footage, cyber forensics experts were able to recover fragments of deleted data. These reconstructed clips showed Zoe entering Blackwell's office on the afternoon of February 15th, but never leaving. The implications were damning. Interviews with base personnel began to paint a clearer picture of the relationship between Blackwell and Zoe. While many were reluctant to speak ill of a superior officer, some junior staff members reported tensions and unusual behavior in the weeks leading up to Zoe's disappearance. One brave intern came forward with information about overheard arguments and Blackwell's increasingly controlling behavior towards Zoe. The breakthrough that ultimately cracked the case came from an unexpected source. A member of the janitorial staff, working late on the night of February 15th, reported seeing a figure resembling Blackwell carrying a large, heavy object wrapped in a tarp through a seldom-used corridor. This testimony, combined with trace evidence found in Blackwell's car, provided the final pieces of the puzzle. Confronted with the mounting evidence, Blackwell's carefully constructed alibi began to crumble. During an intense interrogation by Cordova and NCIS agents, the commander's composure finally broke. In a moment of emotional catharsis, Blackwell confessed to his affair with Zoe, the argument that led to her accidental death, and his subsequent attempts to cover up the incident. The confession sent shockwaves through the naval base and the wider community of Pelican Bay. The story of the decorated commander and the young intern captivated national attention, becoming a cautionary tale of power, infidelity, and the devastating consequences of a moment's loss of control. Blackwell was immediately taken into custody, charged with manslaughter, and multiple counts related to the cover-up of Zoe's death. The naval community, once proud of Blackwell's accomplishments, now grappled with the betrayal of trust and the tragic loss of a promising young life. As news of Blackwell's arrest spread, others came forward with information they had previously been afraid to share. The full extent of his paranoid behavior and emotional manipulation in the months leading up to Zoe's death came to light, revealing a man who had been spiraling out of control long before that fatal day in February. The case against Desmond Blackwell was strong, built on physical evidence, witness testimonies, and his own confession. As he awaited trial, the once respected commander faced not only the loss of his freedom, but also the destruction of his career, reputation, and family. The tragedy of Zoe Brennan's death had far-reaching consequences, forever altering the lives of all involved and leaving an indelible mark on the community of Pelican Bay. After 5 days of deliberation, the jury returned a guilty verdict on charges of manslaughter, obstruction of justice, and tampering with evidence. Desmond Blackwell was sentenced to 20 years in federal prison, with the possibility of parole after 15 years.
If you're enjoying this story, kindly do us a favor and subscribe to our channel. It is free and won't cost anything, but it means the world to us. We're just a small channel trying to grow. Thank you, and back